Hey everyone, this is Greg, your host of Goddamn Gamecube. Thank you for tuning in to Season 2. All episodes in this season were conducted virtually over the internet because of the coronavirus pandemic, so please excuse any audio glitches or oddities you may hear during these episodes. Thank you and enjoy. Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Goddamn Gamecube, the best goddamn video game podcast there is. Greg and Beppy are your hosts today. Now, we have an incredible guest in the house for this episode. Mike Bithell is here with us. He is a game creator and game director, best known for his games Thomas Was Alone, Volume, John Wick Hex, and most recently, the Solitaire Conspiracy. Thank you for joining us, Mike. How are you?
I'm good. That was a lovely intro. Thank you very much. Yeah, no, I'm good. How are you?
Hey, we're feeling great. I mean, we're doing the best we can, with COVID and all that, but we're happy to have you, and let's get right into it. For starters, can you speak on your formative years? I read some anecdotes about you that you developed games for high school projects in lieu of doing essays. Like, did you learn gaming techniques on your own? And did you continue that in university?
Yeah, so I was lucky I had a computer at a really young age because my dad worked in IT and he borrowed one from work. I think borrowed is the best way of putting it, but I used to have so I had access to a computer really early, which was really useful. And yeah, I potted around with BASIC, with QBasic, and then Visual Basic back in the day. And yeah, I guess the first couple of games I made were schoolwork. So I had a couple of teachers who I convinced to let me make basically fake make little video games, little adventure games, where you go to a village and you talk to the people who live in that village and they tell you about feudal British history, and it ticks off the things that need to be in the essay, and it's a game. And so that was kind of a nice way of kind of engaging with that hobby at the start. And then I went to uni and I did a game design degree, got into my first job in the industry from there, and kind of haven't looked back.
Gotcha. Now, moving right into the beginnings of your career. So Thomas Was Alone was obviously a massive success. Was that the first game you released on Congregate, or did you have other prototypes or other stuff you released?
No, that was my first Congregate game. I'd worked on a bunch of games for other people before then. So I'd done worked on a lot of Wii games, like those Wii party games that your gran bought you when you were a kid. You never really enjoyed.
Oh my god!
I worked on a couple of those. Back in the day. So I'd worked on a bunch of games, but no, Congregate. That was the first thing. I think that was the first thing I'd ever uploaded to Congregate. I might have done. Did I put anything on Newgrounds? I might put up some stuff before then, but that was the first kind of quote unquote proper game, and just it seemed to click for people. I think it was. To an extent, just the kind of taking a bunch of stuff I'd learned making, like I said, kind of relatively like family-friendly platformers and party games and stuff, taking all of that kind of skill set and then applying it to a Flash game, I think gave it a little edge, and it went well.
So we're going to stay on that topic for a moment. If we could touch on Bossa games.
Bossa, yeah.
Can you speak on how Thomas went from being a Flash-based Congregate game to a full-fledged title? I read a little bit how... I know you worked at Bossa Games, but was that like a day job and they helped you make it, or did you work there because of Thomas?
So that was a day job. So the story of Thomas Was Alone was I started making it when I worked at a company called Blitz Games, which is where I'd done a bunch of the aforementioned Wii games. And I made this like in my weekends and spent free time and stuff. And back then, I think this is still the case in a lot of game studios, but I think it's less and less common. Basically, my contract meant that they owned anything I made outside of work hours. So Blitz were really cool about it. They kind of gave me a piece of paper, kind of giving me the rights to it and kind of let me go and do my own thing with it. And immediately, a friend of mine who was also working at Blitz went off to form Bossa Studios and offered me a job to come and work for him. And I took it. So I kind of got the contract saying I own Thomas Was Alone and then immediately left. So I worked at Bossa then for a few years while making Thomas Was Alone, basically in my spare time. And then the reason that some versions have Bossa as a publisher is because they helped me in those final moments to kind of get ports out, get those kind of things that I didn't have the logistical kind of setup in place yet to do. Back then it was just me. I didn't have anyone else doing that kind of work. Now there's 2 or 3 very smart people whose job it is to kind of handle all of that stuff for our games. So it was at the time that was kind of the way we got it out, and Bethel were super supportive with that.
Let me ask you this too, getting into the game a little bit. You just mentioned you did Thomas on your spare time, like nights and weekends. Also, you just said that Bosa helped you get the game out in terms of porting and getting it out to platforms. Did they help you on the development level at all, or were all 10.0 levels like done by Mike Bithell?
Oh yeah, no, basically, yeah. So that the PC game was made. The original PC game was just 3 of us. It was me, Dave Houston, who did the music, and Danny Wallace, who recorded the voice performance.
Got it.
So kind of the 3 of us kind of working together got it. I mean, to varying degrees. Danny did a day's work kind of in the booth recording, which was phenomenal. Dave did many months of stuff. I was on it for years and years and years. And yeah, it kind of came together nicely, and we kind of got that first version out, and then Bethel were the guys who then helped us to kind of get that out. But in terms of like the designing of those levels, the writing of all the script, that was kind of all me on that side, and probably the last game that we'll ever do where I can take full responsibility like that for something, because again, now things are bigger and more people are involved.
With respect to, I'm not sure if I'm reading too much into this or I'm drawing a through line where there isn't one, but when I read about, like Greg, that you had created those games for school assignments, I kind of got the same kind of vibe from Thomas Was Alone, because Greg finished it, I'm very close to finishing it, and I thought there was some kind of emphasis on education and the way that we teach people different things, and the way that accessibility, for instance, and how, in a sense, we're all sort of all different shapes and sizes, and we're expected to kind of perform the same task. We all are expected to jump in a sense. I felt very connected to the characters because of how they had to cooperate to survive, and not only like do they jump on each other to get around, but they kind of share their abilities with each other. And I was just curious about how much of that was intentional, or if it was in the forefront of your mind in development.
I think definitely like the cooperative nature. I mean, ultimately it all flows from the game, kind of the core game idea, which is like technically, like by definition, it's cooperative, right? You're making characters work together. So when you're writing a story for a game, in my opinion, the way to write game stories is to reflect the action you're doing in the game. So if you're playing a game about making shapes work together, cooperation has to be a theme, right? It has to be something you're kind of exploring, in my opinion. The other aspect is the educational side of it. That's definitely, the game definitely is kind of a game designer nerding out about game design, like to an extent. Like there's definitely like, it's weird going back. Obviously I made it years ago and then don't play it. It's not like it's not on my rotation to play very often. But I played it recently for the Switch port, just to kind of review the Switch port and make sure we were happy with how that was going. And it was weird going back to it, because you definitely is like a weird snapshot of like younger me and kind of my interest in design. And to an extent, the educational thing is a natural kind of outcome of that, just because game design ultimately is teaching. Like I've always said, game designers, to an extent, we're teachers of useless skills, right? Like we are basically, like when you're playing a video game, we're training you how to play that game. Like we're instructing you, we're informing you. You can never take that information and use it in real life, but like you're learning. You are going to school when you play a game, and arguably that's a big chunk of the fun of a video game, is learning it, is mastering it, is your understanding growing. As human beings, we get a real thrill out of becoming smarter at something. That's a real getting comfortable, and just daft things like learning, the when you move to a new area and you need to like learn your way around town a little bit. When you get that sense of, I know where things are now, that feels good. That's a nice endorphin rush. Humans want to solve problems and work stuff out. And that's a big part of what games are kind of playing with. So I think Thomas Was Alone kind of does acknowledge that and engages with that a little bit as an idea, because it was something, not because of any highfalutin goals, just that was kind of what I was into when I was making it. I was a game designer, so I was kind of fascinated by that kind of how do we teach people things question.
I mean, I do want to say that it still holds up, and I did get emotional over rectangles all over again. So, so moving on, after the success of Thomas, you went solo. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about the pressure and hype after selling so many units of Thomas? Like, how did your personal and professional life change? after Thomas released?
Slowly, to be honest. Like, it wasn't, especially with Thomas Was Alone, I think when you look back on things like that have been around for as long as Thomas Was Alone has, like, Thomas Was Alone was out for 6 months before it sold any units. Like, it was an absolute bomb. Like, it didn't do any business at all until the big breakout for it was a combination of it coming out on PlayStation and Total Biscuit doing a review of it back then. And those kind of two events kind of just triggered it to explode. So at that point it was, I could quit my day job. I had enough money in the bank. I was like, it was like a year's salary. And I was like, this is enough money that I have to go and like roll the dice and try something. But it wasn't like I'm buying a Ferrari money. You know what I mean? Like, it was never, that was the thing, was it kind of never was. It was very much kind of a steady stream of money rather than like a big cash flow thing. I did buy, like, I remember buying like some really expensive Lego I'd wanted for years.
I love that. That's awesome.
A couple of like nerdy things like that of like wish fulfillment stuff. But after that, ultimately it just comes back to like, well, okay, I have this much, runway, we call it nerdly in tech circles, like I have this much money before the money runs out. I need to make something that hopefully makes more money so that I get more runway. And essentially that's been the 9 years now since Thomas Was Alone came out, has been just trying to like push the money running out line further off into the future. And sometimes we get a little closer to it and sometimes we get a little further from it, but ultimately that's all we're doing. So I'm very lucky to have that freedom and to have, the freedom creatively to just make whatever I want. But like, it definitely, I don't feel like I'm rich. I feel like I'm kind of like running a company that's kind of trying to keep all the people who work at it kind of doing their thing. The weird thing with the personal life stuff is, honestly, it was this weirdly unique and personal experience where it was like, leaving a day job, working from home, not seeing people so much. And it was this really unique, interesting thing that I talked to people about my life and this weird moment. And now everyone's there.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's really weird going from the place of like, where that was a unique experience to just like, it was kind of like where we're all at now, but I was the only one doing it. And it was weird because it was those first few months as well, just like not having normal work hours for the first time as an adult. And to be honest, for the first time, like, I went straight from school to uni to work, like being able to like go to the cinema at 2 p.m. and no one's there and watch a movie was just, it was awesome. It was incredible. Like, there was like definitely months there of just like getting used to this idea of living outside of regular working things. But like I said, now it's just how everyone is. And like, there's now a queue for the coffee shop because everyone's working from home. Whereas I was kind of doing my thing quite happily. Obviously that's not the worst outcome of the current situation, but like, it definitely was, I think it's definitely helped people to like, it's definitely makes it relate more to like people. I think everyone would understand what that was now, whereas before, you work from home was a really weird kind of concept for a lot of people to grasp.
What I was going to say is, as a sort of a second part of that question, I read a little bit. I was watching some past interviews with you from that time, and you said that after Thomas Was Alone came out, you had a little bit more maybe sense of responsibility on Twitter and on your socials, because now, whether you like it or not, you're kind of an, I don't want to use the word influencer, but you know what I mean? Where you have sort of a public persona, people know who you are after Thomas Was Alone. So I think you made a tweet recently where you said like, you're this close to not being able to be sarcastic on Twitter anymore.
Oh, I'm like, over the line. Yeah, I have.
Like, did that start with Thomas Was Alone, and how is that changed, if at all?
It did. I mean, I think it's just grown over time. It was weird because I think there was definitely like around Thomas Was Alone's release, there was definitely social media was this new interesting thing. Everyone was playing with it. Everyone was oversharing. Everyone was posting images of what they were eating that day, but also just like sharing their personal lives and kind of. And then I think what happened, largely down to like the morons of Gamergate and those kind of things, it became this kind of, we all realized, oh wait, we can't share this much. We can't be this open because there's idiots who are going to try and destroy your life because of this stuff, because they don't like a video game you made. So I think there was this sweet innocent time. Then there was like the hell of that dropping. And then I think ultimately, like, yeah, I think most people now just are very conscious of what they're sharing on social media and what they're projecting and presenting themselves. Like people who aren't like influencers, people who aren't like making things and promoting themselves in that way, people who work in shops and are normal people living normal lives can still find themselves in the middle of a social media explosion, right? So you I think everyone kind of does PR now. Everyone's kind of thinking about that public persona. So I think that's more of a shift just generally, but it's been an interesting one to watch. And yes, like, yeah, I definitely, for me as well, the big thing is it's not just a responsibility to be like, to present well. It's also now I'm responsible for a lot of people's jobs, right? Like if I say something awful on Twitter, which I'm not planning on doing, by the way, but if I did, that's, there's like 10 people whose jobs would be directly affected by that immediately, and 20 people whose jobs would be affected eventually by me messing up. So yeah, there's a certain responsibility that comes there, but that's part of being an adult as well, to be honest.
That's well said. So let's move ahead to Volume. For our audience out there who are familiar with your games, but they're not knowledgeable on game development, could you talk about how a game like Volume gets off the ground, so to speak? Like, did it start with a prototype like Thomas? And as a side note, we have big love for Metal Gear Solid and Hideo Kojima on this show.
Well, rightly so. Yeah, rightly so. Great franchise. So me too, unsurprisingly, if you've played Volume, you will see the interest. It was basically, Volume was definitely came from a place of, okay, I made the stupid rectangle game.
Oh, don't call it stupid.
I made the critically acclaimed masterpiece.
Thank you. There you go. Thank you. Continue.
I made that game, and that obviously gave me resources and opportunity and visibility. And it was kind of that situation of, I owe it to 12-year-old Mike to make the game that he would want to make, that I dreamed of making since then. And that was what Volume was. Ultimately, was absolutely an almost masturbatory exercise of just like, I'm going to make exactly what I want, and I don't really care. I'm going to do it. It's going to be my ode to Metal Gear Solid, of course, and other things. It started, as you'd expect I made a little prototype, and then you start building a team around that, and you start going, okay, we need these skills, we need these people. And now, obviously, because Thomas was alone, I had the resources to hire people, and it grew up.
On that same subject, I know you had several talented voice actors for this game, and the team expanded quite a bit to complete the project. I also wasn't aware at the time, but I read a report that you overworked yourself heavily on Volume. Yeah. Is this the point where like Bithell Games as a company kind of started, where you had employees, or can you talk about how the team expanded and sort of the stress point of that time?
So Volume was freelancers mostly, so it wasn't so much technically kind of full-time staff, but it was definitely like a responsibility for lots of people and lots of people's kind of work. I think it was the project where I realized I couldn't make a bigger game like a hobby project, right? What had worked really well for Thomas Was Alone of kind of, I'll mess around with it in the evenings and weekends and I'll get it done. When you're working on your own stuff and you don't have a day job, you're working a full-time day, and then you're also hobbying on this thing, and it's very complex, and you're doing phone calls at 11 p.m. I found an old folder of like me, like videos I'd made for the team, like showing them new features we were adding to the game, like from Volume. And it's footage of me like at like 11:30 at night, a little bit of sweat on my forehead. Like, guys, I finally finished the thing. I'm watching it. I'm like, this guy is gonna die. This is horrible. Like this is not healthy. And in fact, I did end up in the hospital with some like heart palpitations and stuff. I was not well. Yeah, no, it was bad. But it was because I'd kind of repeated some of those patterns from working on hobby projects and taken that into something which was bigger. So yeah, Volume. The game came out and was good, but I also definitely made choices about like, okay, it's time to be a grown-up, it's time to be professional. So that's where, people like my business partner, Alexander, comes in and kind of starts like professionalizing the company and setting up the bank accounts correctly and making sure everything's kind of running like a real business. And from there, like, full-time staff and then recently, bringing in project managers and producers and kind of having those kind of all of that structure that I kind of stepped away from by doing my own thing. And then you slowly realize, oh no, all those people were doing things that were important. You know, they were actually kind of relevant. And when you're first starting out, you can't afford that. But then, you know, hopefully once you've got a couple of kind of hits to your name and you've got some money around, you can start to scale things up. And that's ultimately where we went. And a big part of that was just kind of making me more healthy. Because another part of my whole mindset is I don't overwork anyone who works with me. So we don't do crunch as a company, but that can cause the outside effect that I take on too much stuff myself, you know.
Sure.
And it's always about kind of making sure, like, no, Mike, stop working. You know, I have people who around me now who tell me to stop working, which is great.
Got it. Beppy, do you want to continue on that topic?
Yeah, I meant to cut in about when we were talking a little bit about Metal Gear Solid and how I was just curious if you had any thoughts about the evolution of stealth in video games, because I mean, with Kojima especially, I think he like continues to innovate like every time, like even like the very first game all the way up to like now Death Stranding. There's still a lot of stealth in that game as well. I'm imagining that AI has quite a bit to do with it, but I was just curious if you had any thoughts on how far it's come and where you think it might go.
That's a really good question. I do. I think it's a genre that probably more than most genres has evolved over time and drastically, right? Volume, the original thinking was the pitch basically to people initially with Volume was, I'm going to make a world that pretends that all of stealth games copied Metal Gear Solid, not Thief. Like, it was like an alternate universe kind of where it was about walls blocking views rather than light and dark, because everything went in the Thief direction. You see that too even with later Kojima games, right? You start to see that come in, and that kind of grid work, avoiding vision cones kind of stealth kind of disappears, and arguably rightly so. It's a very retro kind of vibe, but it was only something I was interested in playing with some more and doing some stuff. In terms of where it's going, I mean, honestly, I like Death Stranding a lot. But the game that like I'm obsessed with is Hitman. Like, I think Hitman, the latest Hitmans, is like what they're doing and the kind of the complexity they're being able to introduce and the kind of the quality of that simulation and that world and the kind of the way you're kind of influencing events and navigating hundreds of people and doing really interesting kind of stuff. That's what excites me about the future of stealth, because stealth has always been built around a conceit, right? All stealth is basically silly in terms of like realism, right? Because
yeah.
Sam Fisher is not going to get into that base and do that thing. He's going to get caught inevitably very quickly. It's not the best way to do any of those things. And there is an inherent silliness to walking up really quietly behind someone and snapping their neck. That doesn't make any sense.
You see a cardboard box walking around, you're like, it must have been nothing.
That was a running joke when the first of this new trilogy of Hitman came out. I would do a thing. Me and my girlfriend both work from home, and she has a different room she works in to me. And if I wanted to like get her to come out for like lunch or something, I would take a coin and like flick it outside her door. And I just hear like her yell back, like, if you're doing that Agent 47 shit again.
Oh my God.
so yeah, but I love that stuff. It's silly, but it's fun. And I think what's interesting with Hitman is the theatricality and playing into that fun. And that's why I'm so excited for the Bond game from IO. Like that's can't wait to see what they do with that, because I think that's theoretically just such an interesting set of rules. If you think about any great kind of scene from a James Bond movie, all the different ways that Bond could approach that space and how he could work through that room, that's exactly the team I want working on that. That's really cool.
Oh, for sure. I think I'm not super familiar with Hitman, but I was listening to someone talk about the new one, and they were playing it on PS5, and they said they had to like strangle someone, and that like the haptic feedback, like it made me feel sick because I felt like I was really strangling.
The little click of it.
Oh my God.
It's fascinating, but yeah.
I was gonna say, dude, Blood Money is my shit. I love Hitman Blood Money.
Money's the classic.
Oh my God.
I would love to see them bring like, I'd love to see like a full kind of reimagining of Blood Money with the modern day objective system. I would be all over. I'd love that.
Dude, oh my God. Oh, I could talk about Hitman forever, but I am going to move on. So let's talk about your career post-release of Volume to now. How does, for our audience who is maybe unfamiliar, how does an independent developer like yourself fund your projects? Is it from personal funds, investors, and how has this maybe expanded or changed since Volume?
I mean, honestly, as an indie studio, wherever the hell we can get it is the money conversation.
Yeah.
No, like, so it varies. Like, some of our stuff is self-funded. Generally, the smaller stuff is self-funded because we'll have, a team sitting around with nothing to do between projects, and obviously we want to work out how to like not fire them and also have like new stuff coming out to kind of fund their time. But in terms of the bigger stuff, we'll get kind of a publisher situation. So like John Wick, for example, was done with a publisher. Subsurface Circular was self-funded. Like it very Solitaire was self-funded again because it was a smaller one. So we mix things up, but ultimately wherever we can get the funding, and we're lucky in that we have a good reputation with publishers, as we get the job done and we get stuff delivered on time, and that goes a long way with publishers.
I was going to say, expanding on the money subject. How do you, or I should say how does Bithell Games decide budgets? Like, getting more in depth here, like team size, departments, marketing. I mean, there are so many aspects, to making a game and getting it out the door. How do you manage that budget?
So the trick is to have lots of very clever people in a room. So the way we do it, and different places do it different ways, but what we do is we make sure we have specifically, I guess, the three people who are always in that room. Myself, because I've shipped a lot of games, so I have a general sense of how long things take. So like this kind of game, we need this kind of number of people in these kind of jobs, and it'll take about this long. So I've got a general idea of that. We've got we'll have a production manager come in, and they'll have a sense of how that all those people are going to flow around the project and how that can work. And then my business partner, Alexander, who is a brilliant kind of financial nerd, and will work out exactly how many contingency budgets and things he needs to make work in that. And then you take all of those people's estimates, and then you add a bunch of time and money to it, because every video game goes massively over budget and time. So you kind of structure around the assumption that you'll be late, which is how you avoid crunch. Most crunch situations are because a management team have underestimated how much things are going to go wrong. We massively overestimate how much things are going to go wrong, and kind of leave space in our budget and schedule for that, which is always really weird when something doesn't go wrong, because then you're like, we're finished really early on this. That doesn't, it has happened. I think it's happened like once or twice, and when it happens, you're like, this is great, but we need to not change any of our systems because the next one will be slow or whatever. And then you just kind of work it out, and it's exactly how you imagine it would be, just from like a practical point of view. It's like, I need someone who can do this job on a game team. I need them for this amount of time. They cost this much a day. And we expect everything to take about, a third of or a half as long extra as we think it will, because we need to put in that buffer. And then you just do those numbers. Like it's not witchcraft. It's just it's bothering to do it. Ultimately, it's bothering to do it. The other thing that's also, I think sometimes gamers kind of will miss, or maybe haven't thought about, often the kind of game you're making will define the budget you're able to spend, because either if you're self-funding, you're like, well, we think this many people will realistically buy this game, so therefore how much they'll pay, so okay, that's how much money we have then, assuming we want to make a bit of profit as well, of course, that's how much we can spend, so you'll do that. Or if you're talking to a publisher, something like John Wick, the publisher will know how much money they want to spend on it, and you're basically going to try and work out like how much game can we make for that. That seems to work.
So you had touched on crunch a couple of times during this discussion. Obviously, big topic, in games communities, big subject. Can you talk a little bit about maybe like what consumers can realistically do to discourage crunch? Because I feel like sometimes, when you're in the Twitter spheres, I see this disparity between developers or publishers having their opinions on this, and then the gaming community, or the vocal part of the gaming community.
Well, I had a sort of a more specific, because I've seen we don't have to name them by name, but two of the biggest games of last year were notorious for having a lot of crunch. And there's obviously always a lot of opinions on the internet. And, some people were saying, you should boycott companies that do this. Other people are saying, if you do that, they're just kind of suffering for nothing. And I feel like very powerless as just kind of like a, our little sphere. Like I was just curious if you had any perspective on what we can do as consumers to discourage this practice, if anything.
So that's a good question, because there is a disjoint, right? Like, and ultimately, I think to an extent, like a consumer or gamer or player or whatever we want to call them, like ultimately your job is to be entertained in all of this. Your job is to enjoy something we put in front of you. And that I think you can be a conscious consumer, you can be like aware of the issues and wanting to do right. But ultimately, I don't think it's your responsibility to save the games industry from ourselves. I think what you can do and what is valid is making your opinions known. And we've seen this time and again, it's not going to work on one game. Like, it's not going to be a case of like, let's boycott game X because we've heard it's crunching its people. That's never going to work, because there's going to be many more people who've never even heard about the issue who are just going to buy it anyway. That game will sell what it's going to sell regardless. But what's crucial, and what I think players maybe underestimate, is that what you say online is read by lots of people, and how you respond and how you feel about games is something that is paid attention to. And when we're all sat around the tables having conversations, and I know quite a few AAA people and quite a few kind of big studio people at high levels, they will be talking about this stuff. They are aware of what gamers think about major subjects. Ultimately, then it's their choice of, do they bother to do anything about it? And that's where, the intensity of that feeling matters, and why it's a cumulative effect. So you won't be able to boycott a big AAA game and save the team who made it. But if you're making it known publicly that as a consumer, you're uncomfortable buying products that are made in that way, it has a cumulative effect on the conversations. And it makes it really good for people like me to walk into the room, and I have, and say to publishers who we're maybe going to work with in the future or whatever, my team doesn't crunch. And it used to be, when I said that 5 years ago, people would act like I was lazy. But now they go, oh yeah, we've heard that's a problem, right? People shouldn't do that. Right. And it's like, that's the difference. And that's the switch over that I think consumers can have, is it's just changing the temperature. The other thing that I've seen that I think is great is I see a lot less players complaining about games being late than I used to. That's also a really good pressure release, is generally if a game's announced as coming out later than expected, I will see, like on Twitter or on games websites, a bunch of comments going, cool, good luck to the team, it's going to be better. Like, that's great news. Yeah, I can't wait to play it, but looking forward to it and hope everyone's okay. That maturity from the audience also helps, because again, the decision to delay or not delay a game and crunch or not crunch a team is a decision being made by executives in rooms who are weighing up lots of factors: the money, the time, when the investor call is, when the financial year ends, all of the stuff they have to pay attention to. But one of the columns in those considerations is, what are the gamers going to think? What am I going to see on social media? What am I going to see in YouTube comments? And the fact that a vocal group of players is now starting to hold those things accountable is great. As long as everyone's civil, as long as no one's sending crap to community managers. It's worth saying community managers, the people who actually run the accounts for big companies, they're never the people making the decisions. So like, I don't like to see them get abuse, but letting developers know we don't like this in regards to crunch is absolutely valid, and absolutely something that will slowly continue to have an impact. And we see it having an impact. There's definitely a change in culture. And the other thing is, it also boosts the people within games companies who maybe are arguing against this behavior. It shows them that they have support as well. They can, even if their boss doesn't read Twitter, they can still walk into a room with like a printout of, here's all the players complaining that you're making us crunch. That's damaging your reputation. So there is still this cumulative thing. As with any kind of activism, it's very rare that someone solves a problem in a convenient 1.5 hours that can be turned into a movie. It's usually kind of a lot of people working very hard for a long time to get anything done. And yeah, I think it's working. I do think it's working, and I think we'll see that continue over the next few years.
Wow. It's nice to have hope.
I know. My God, yeah, hope, my least favorite emotion, right? No,
none of us hope anymore.
I want to say, like, dude, I agree with you, and thank God, like, the vocal or a majority or vocal on Twitter are supporting, delays, or I hope the devs are okay and it's going to make for a better game. Thank God. But let's move on actually to a similar subject of making a better game. So we recently had Bill Gardner from the BioShock team on the show, and he talked a lot about playtesting and how BioShock was iterated on and changed a lot in development. Can you speak a little bit on how Bithell Games handles playtesting, or do you have any specific anecdotes from playtesting that significantly changed one of your games?
So it varies for us. Like, again, like at the indie side, budget always plays a factor. So there's generally the games that we make that are bigger tend to have more official playtesting, and the ones that are smaller tend to have more emailing it to a bunch of mates playtesting. So that works out well. Like, so with John Wick, there were, we spent days in one of those rooms with the video monitors of people playing the game and doing all of the proper play testing. With Solitaire, it was more a case of just sending it to some mates and getting feedback. But yeah, I mean, fundamentally, we change our games quite drastically based on play testing. Stuff we're working on right now, we just actually went through a round of play testing on something we've not announced yet. Fundamental shifts to like the design of that game and the way that game explains itself based on playtest. What's fascinating with playtesting is how similar people are. Like, we all think of ourselves as like unique, people with our own kind of limitations and successes and blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, you put 10 people in a room with a video game that's not finished, they're going to say the same stuff over and over and over again. And that's exciting. Like, that's really cool. Being in that room, it's the first time you do it as a developer, it's terrifying because you're like, they hate me. They hate what I've made. It sucks. But then what's brilliant about the process of playtesting is you see patterns and you start being able to work on those. I'm trying to think of an example of something drastically changing in one of our games based on playtesting. I think Solitaire was interesting in that it had a really bad tutorial. Like, when we started doing our playtesting, we had, because game designers we hate tutorials, right? In the same way as players hate tutorials. We don't like them. They suck. They're distracting. You just want to get to the fun, like blah, 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 blah. So I had made the same mistake that every game designer left their own devices makes, which Solitaire basically didn't have a tutorial. And it's Solitaire, right? Like, people know Solitaire. And then we play tested it and no one knows Solitaire.
Oh boy.
And it was like, and some of the stuff we were getting back people who like had imagined complete mechanics that weren't there. We were getting stuff back where people, had rage quit the first game of Solitaire they played in the game. And in the end, what we ended up adding, if you go and play Solitaire Conspiracy now, and you should, it's a great game. That game basically has essentially like a Zynga or like Facebook game style intro where there's like a thing that flashes on the card and says, click this, and then you click this, and then it says, okay, now move it over here. And it's one of those tutorials that, like, as a gamer, I'm like, oh, why? But everyone gets the game now, and we've never had any problems, and it teaches the job. So it's one of those things where it's like, I cringe every time I see it, but it's like, it worked, and now everyone likes the game. So that's probably the thing that playtesting will often reveal to you is there's no room for, oh, I'm sure it's fine, which is something we all do all the time, right? We're like, oh, I don't need to worry about that. Like, people take a little while to work it out, but they'll have fun. They'll figure it out. And then playtesting just basically reveals all of that and says, no, this thing that you think doesn't matter much, but it doesn't matter much to everyone. So therefore, it's causing this cumulative problem.
I feel like that kind of also reveals a little bit of interesting in the specific nature of this medium is that a certain level of artistic compromise is sometimes necessary.
Yeah, we're making entertainment. And you're also, this is weird. This is a topic that came up on the latest episode of the podcast I do with some mates, but it is that kind of, you're kind of welcoming people into your home a little bit as a game designer. You're kind of making a space comfortable for people. And that means, you know what, you're going to like, you give them, if you've got someone visiting you who's vegan, you're going to make some vegan food.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like you're trying to make your environment comfortable to other people. And therefore you can be an artist. You can have the vegan shop and go, no,
it's still your house.
I cook burgers only in this house. This is my vision. Yeah. But your vegan friend's probably not going to come over again. And that's the shame, right? Like that's, you know, there's a welcoming element to game design. It's game design. It's about making functional things. What's interesting is if you go too far with that, you can end up with something that feels completely soulless. You know, we talk a lot internally about like grit, like a little bit of like, you don't want to ever make anything absolutely perfect because then it becomes boring. You kind of want a little bit of that bumpiness. You want stuff to be a little bit wrong, a little bit off, because then you're going to like latch onto it more.
What's so interesting is there's a direct relation to that. Like one of my production mantras when I produce music is you don't want it to be so balanced and so perfect where it sounds like nothing. Like you do want things to stick out. So moving on, like if we could talk about the subject of game releases, like when the game comes out, do you, well, I should say several game makers have told me that the release date itself is just one hurdle and post-release comes with so many challenges, whether it's, you know, patches, updates, bonus content. Can you speak a little bit about like release date is hit and then what happens after?
Yeah, so again, this is somewhere where indie differs very much to AAA because and can vary a great deal between kind of different kinds of games. So historically, most of our games have been kind of get a game out and then like patch it, make sure it works, and then run away. Like that's been kind of the way a lot of our games have worked historically, because they weren't made to have lots of DLC or additional content or post-release support. Solitaire was the kind of the first one where we have gotten into this rolling content update. So with release dates, we're with our own self-published games, we're pretty flexible. We don't set a release date up front. We know the rough kind of it'll come out in these somewhere in these few months here. But you know, we leave a little bit of room for ourselves. But then once, like you say, once that's hit, for me, what's weird with our games, and this is pretty consistently across the board, most of our games launch with like one fatal flaw. And I've not worked out how to solve this yet. Every single game we've brought out has had like one glaring design problem that no one caught in playtesting or playing. But like within 2 hours of seeing the first Steam reviews hit, you know, oh no, with Solitaire, it was that we didn't have a fixed difficulty mode. We basically allowed you to play it. It wasn't that the game was too easy. It was they didn't have any kind of limits for like high tier players, and a bunch of those first reviews were negative based on that. And that's often for us, I now basically set aside, like I know the week after launch, I'm going to be fixing whatever that thing was. And then after that, it's just kind of rolling into those updates and patches. But there's definitely there's a catharsis to release, and there's an understanding that the game's good, which is important. Because I think as a developer, you get bored of your game very quickly. Like you make a new thing, it's funny. I'm working on some stuff now, and I things I made 2 days ago, I now think are boring and I probably need to put more work into, because they're things that you've sat with. You know, you mentioned music production. I'm sure it's exactly the same there. Like you sit with it long enough, you've heard it a million times, You don't care so much anymore. So for a team, like from a morale point of view, it's so cool when a game actually launches to be able to go, oh, it's good. I feel like that's my tweet every single time we launch a game is, oh, the game's good, cool. like genuinely, like you don't know at that point. Like you're polishing it, you're trying to get it like bug free and kind of comfortable for players. But like that moment where you realize, oh, people are really connecting with this, that's a special moment. I think then after that, you've got the energy to go and do the rest of the post-release stuff. But for us, we're very reactive because we're small. We can be like AAA. They have to set up a lot of that stuff much more in advance because this level of production is different. Whereas with us, we kind of wait and see a little bit. We didn't know when Solitaire launched that we were going to do additional like crews for it. That was something that came out of the fact that like, oh, this is clicking. This is something people want more of. So okay, we'll get that done.
Could you speak briefly on review embargoes, or that's the term? I don't know if that's the official term, but do you have an opinion on getting reviews? What's the right way for me to articulate this? Do you prefer to get like as many reviews as possible early? I think you recently put out a tweet before Thomas came out on Switch. If there are any like press who need a copy, like reach out to me. Could you speak briefly on maybe your opinion on that sort of debate about getting reviews early and so on?
I mean, we've always done reviews. We've always embargoed our reviews to launch day. And the reason for that is not because we want to hide anything from the audience. We definitely don't want reviews the day after launch. We want them on launch. The reason for that is because as an indie, we just don't have much marketing budget. So we can't be like putting a pre-roll ad on your YouTube videos. We need you to hear about the game. And the best way to get you to hear about that game is for everyone's review to be hitting on the day our thing is out, because then you'll actually go and like, if you're interested, you'll go and check it out. And it's marketing at that point. So that's something we've always done. I think that's cool. I think it gets a little gray area when you're doing pre-orders, because if someone can't see a review of the game until their pre-order clicks in, there's some gray area there. I think Thomas Was Alone's the first time we've done pre-orders while also having a review embargo for launch. The argument being, it's Thomas Was Alone. Like, there's reviews out there. Yeah. If you, and we knew the game was, we knew we'd done a good port. So it was like, ultimately, you're not going to see a review on launch day that's going to change your opinion on Thomas Was Alone in 2021. Like, that's fine. And that was fine by me. That seems to work. We get the benefit from it. It doesn't feel like we're being dishonest with players. I would have a problem with us doing review embargoes like after launch. But yeah, if we did a review embargo a week before launch, we'd get the coverage, but then like people would have stopped talking about the game by the time it actually came out.
Sure.
I get it with like, you know, when you're like a first party or a big publisher, it makes perfect sense to like the hype you get, like when you've got like, you know, a first party Sony game and like the week before launch, you see the reviews and they're positive and you're like, oh, I'm dying to play it. And in my case, like trying not to DM someone at Sony to try and get an early code because I don't want to like annoy them. So like just like, oh, I really want to play it. That works for them, but like at the indie scale, it's not something we can do.
Got it. So we're coming down to the last few questions here. Cool. So for our younger aspiring audience, can you talk about maybe a moment in your career when you struggled and how you maybe persevered through that hard moment? Like, I think you talked about this a little bit where you do your passion full time. And for a lot of people, it's really hard to get to that point and to, you know, hey, I do my passion full time and it's what I do. Can you speak on maybe a tough point in your life, if you don't mind, professionally? Yeah,
I mean, I definitely struggled at the start of my career. Like as a junior, I guess was kind of picked on. Like I was also pretty like rubbish at my job as well. I think the start of games careers can be tough. Like the starter jobs in the games industry are not particularly interesting. We try and make them interesting at our place, but even then, like it's you're still doing a lot of boring grunt work. And I think that's the case. Like I think that's the case, especially for someone young who's joining the industry. Like accepting that you're not going to be doing the cool job straight away. And that there's also lessons that can be learned doing the rubbish job and the boring job. Like is important. I think that's probably the most stressed I've been in my career was right at the start. A kind of frustration of no one listening to me or feeling like I didn't have an impact. And you know, if you work somewhere good, you'll have a boss that does encourage you and does listen to you, but like it can be incredibly kind of harsh. So yeah, I think that's the toughest time. And then, you know, I think since then, the tough thing with this question is like, you know, I worked for about 6 years for other people. I made Thomas Was Alone, and all my post Thomas Was Alone problems are like, oh guys, like it's really tiring when you're like doing a job that you love and then you have to do like too many hours of it and then you're like sleepy. Like none of those problems those are problems I'll talk to like friends about, but people on the podcast, people listening to a podcast don't want to hear me complain about like, oh, so you got your dream job and now it's a little bit tricky. Great.
That's what we're here for. We provide therapy.
So we've talked about Thomas Was Alone a lot on this. So your first game, Thomas Was Alone, was just re-released on Switch by Thomas Was Alone on Switch, right? So let's do the plug.
I think they should. I think if they've made this, if they've made it this far and they've no idea what it is, they should probably check it out. Yeah.
My question for you was: it's been 9 or 10 years since the original worldwide release. Mm-hmm. Looking back at the past 10 years of your career, is there like a hallmark thing that you learned along the way, whether it's about game development or the business, and whether that's positive or negative?
I'm going to pull it back. I'm going to bring it back to earlier in the conversation.
Bring it back.
I think I kind of learned the main lesson of Thomas Was Alone, which is cooperation and collaboration. And I think Thomas Was Alone was a game definitely like made by me and a couple of people, and like basically like me not doing anything anyone else said and just doing my own thing. And I think what my career since then has been just kind of giving up control and learning how to work with people better and how to make these kind of great things that I couldn't make on my own, they couldn't make on their own, but we come together and we make something better than the sum of the parts. So in a weird way, I feel like I've finally learned the lesson of something I wrote 10 years ago. Like with the whole going back and playing it thing.
Yeah.
I was playing it and I was like, I can't remember what the moment was, but there was some moment like a nice little story beat of a character coming to a realization. I was like, wow, this is a really clever game. I definitely wasn't that clever when I wrote this. So like, I mean, there must have been like some accidental moment of something, or I stole it from a movie maybe or something, but it was
you fell backwards into success, right? A little bit with that moment.
I think anyone who's achieved any level of success and doesn't put random chance as one of the key inputs into that is stupid, basically. Like I think it's an interesting thing about success, and you know, you meet a lot of successful people, you'll see this pattern repeat a lot, is it definitely can reinforce wrong assumptions. Like it can definitely like make someone go, oh, I guess I was really clever to have achieved that thing.
Yeah.
If you fall down that rabbit hole of like thinking you're clever, there's no getting out of that. And I've seen too many people kind of fall down that hole. I'm a lucky bastard, and that's fine.
I love that.
I can live with that.
I think also this happens a lot when I'm talking to people, like, or I should say arguing with people on the internet about like movies or video games or whatever, but it's like I'll call attention to something that I think is cool or that resonated with me, and they're like, well, that wasn't intentional. I'm like, does it matter? I mean, that's how I read it. So I think that it, in particular, that's kind of explains why you might feel that way. But
that's the beauty of any creative endeavor, right? And we bring a lot of ourselves to anything, and games arguably more than any other medium, right? Like that line I liked in Thomas Was Alone, I kind of co-wrote that. Like me reading that now in the future, kind of co-wrote that. I've added a meaning to that probably dumbass Mike of 2011 wasn't doing on purpose. And yeah, that's valuable. That's humans, and that's how we've evolved, right? Is to collaborate, to find things together, to kind of create more than we could have done on our own. So yeah, I think that's probably like my big personal growth since the release of Thomas Was Alone, was realizing that.
So I pretty much was curious. I mean, earlier you spoke a little about waiting a little bit longer for your coffee, but I was just curious about how the last year has affected not only your work life, but like, how are you doing? Are you holding up okay?
That's sweet of you to ask. I'm good. I definitely miss people, like in-person people. Like I obviously I spend most of my day talking to various people, but like I miss going to events. I miss seeing friends. I miss seeing family. I miss seeing, you know, work acquaintances. Like there are people who I always have a really fun time with for like one specific party at one specific event every year, you know, in the games industry. And I miss those people. I miss that stuff, those kind of relationships. I think that sucks. I know in terms of challenges, like I've been lucky, touch wood, like not directly personally affected, but lots of friends and family who've kind of had complications or problems as a result of this, and trying to kind of help people through that. People I work with, friends, colleagues, family, like, you know, it's touched everyone's kind of group around them in some way or another. So that sucks. But like, yeah, I remain optimistic and hopeful that we're gonna come out of this stronger. I think there's also like, I think one of the things that I find really interesting is how introspective the human race has gotten for a year. Like that there's been a lot more, I feel like a lot of kind of, especially like in like activism circles and social justice circles, like a lot of conversations have reached kind of mainstream because there's fuck all else to talk about. You know what I mean? Like I think there's been a kind
Holy
of
shit.
Slowed the way down. Yeah. I
think everyone's taken a moment and looked around and thought a little bit about the world and about how they treat people and about how we can do better. And I think if there is a silver lining to something that's obviously a terrible, awful event that's killed a lot of people, that's probably the only one I could reach for, is that there is a degree of that introspection that's occurred, which is good. It sucks that it requires such a terrible event to trigger that, but I think that's something I cling to as a positive. Is I think we have had a lot of conversations and actually taken a lot of important actions on a lot of those fronts as well. So that's good. That's a positive. But yeah, it's been pretty crappy for everyone, I think. How are you doing?
We're surviving. I mean, well, unfortunately, I mean, I'm a musician for a living. That's the joke I make. So I mean, I've been non-essential my whole life. So
you and me too.
You're essential
brother.
to me.
Yeah, holy shit. Yeah, so I mean, I think, Mike, I don't think we ever interacted at PAX. Like, I perform in the Barbershop Quartet every year. I know you've spoken at PAX every year. I don't think we've ever interacted. But I mean, clearly that's something I've missed, being a musician. I was on the road a lot, so it's been different for me for sure. But I'm holding up. Beppy, how are you doing before we get down to the next question?
Oh, I'm hanging in there. You just brought to mind, I think like the day last year when we were shut down, I went out for pizza or something, and everyone there was just like so much nicer than they're nice guys, but they were just so like compassionate. And I think that's what's keeping me going, is how like everyone is kind of, well, not everyone, but a good amount of people are kind of collaborating, and we'll get through this together. So
yeah, agreed.
That's my take.
So yeah, dude, for sure. So we've come to the end here. So before we close this out, we're going to hit you with very quick fire questions. So let's go rapid fire. Are you ready?
Sure. Let's do it.
Here we go. I need to know the answer to this. Please indulge me. So Barack Obama follows you on Twitter. Is this happenstance, or did you guys cross paths?
Never met him. No idea why.
Okay. That's awesome.
I've no idea. I've noticed. It's weird. I don't know. You know what? I think I DM'd him and was like, "Hey, Barack Obama, what's up?"
Holy shit!
And I don't think he replied. So I assume like some staffer like automatically followed a few people or something. I'm sure he's not a Thomas Was Alone fan.
I thought maybe it was like an ambassador gift or something, but I'm wrong. So okay, personal question. Listen, I'm wearing my Play, Watch, Listen shirt right now, dude.
Oh, are you? Oh,
yeah, here we go. Cool. Where is it? There it is.
Oh, look, there it is. Hey.
All right. So my question for you is rapid fire. Did you know the gang personally beforehand, before getting the show together, or how did you become friendly with them?
So yes, to different extents. Like I'd known all three of them, like in different, like to different levels, just kind of like to say hey at events and stuff, like not like close friends, but we knew each other. And then me, Troy, and Austin all worked on John Wick together.
That's right.
And we we did a stage thing at New York Comic Con, and I thought of Alana to host it because she's great, has her shit together in ways no one else does. She's brilliant. So got her to kind of host it. And it was basically, we did that panel together, had just a really fun time. And yeah, when, months later, Alana messaged the three of us and was like, hey, that was like, there was nice chemistry there. There was a good group of people. Do you want to like do something together? And that's where it came from. So it was all Alana's idea. It's honestly just been lovely because I love those three people so much. Like just to be able, it's just a nice excuse to hang out. We talk shit on the show. We talk a lot of shit before we start recording. We talk a lot of shit after we start recording.
I love it.
After we finish,
Dude, I watch it every week. I actually think it's very insightful. I really like it a lot. Like I wouldn't have bought the shirt. I watch it every week. And dude, I'm not joking. Like, I mean, because of COVID, I've been home so much. I look forward to it every Friday, dude.
People seem to it seems to have clicked for people. It's weird. It was originally like the first episode, I think we were playing through the monthly. And what's funny, I've not watched them back at all, but like Alana said to me, like the first couple of episodes, I keep mentioning COVID and no one believes me.
Holy shit.
And it's like, I'm like, this is going to be a big deal, guys. And everyone's like, oh, it'll blow over. And then you slowly, apparently over the first few episodes, you see that transition take place.
One man
I need
saw
to go
it
back
coming.
and watch it, but yeah.
Beppy, go.
So I don't believe Greg can weigh in here, but in terms of discussing John Wick, do you have a particular a favorite movie in the series and a favorite kill of his?
Definitely two in terms of movies, I think.
Absolutely correct.
Three, thank you.
You are correct.
Three I was too close to because I read the screenplay before they shot it.
I heard about that, yeah.
I saw it I was making the game while they were doing that. I got to see the premiere and fucking Man's Chinese Theater and all that stuff. So that three I've not actually watched since we made the game, because it's too. It was a movie that was like I saw it being made in slow motion, which was odd, But so two's the special one in terms of kill. Gosh, it might be in the best kill might be the sequence in the first movie where he pauses to reload mid fighting someone and kills them. There's a moment, it's in the nightclub scene. He's in like, it's the room with all the columns in, and he's fighting someone. He runs out of bullets. He like holds them up by their tie, I think, while he's like
his
reloading.
beard, I think. Yeah,
beard, that's right. And finishes.
That's awesome.
So that's probably my favorite kill. What's your favorite kill?
I think I was thinking back on it as well. I think also from the first movie when I think he runs someone over with his car and shoots him through the roof of his car as he's flipping over it. It's amazing. Unbelievable.
Oh, it was so fun to hang out with those people and just kind of get a sense of how they make a film. It's really interesting.
Yeah, they seem like the really cool guys.
Mm-hmm, they are.
Last rapid fire question. So I'm unfortunately a musician, and the most common interview question I get is, what's a song you love that you wish you wrote? My question for you, Mike, is what is a game you love that you wish you made or that you were on the dev team for?
I think honestly, Sam knows this. Anything by Sam Barlow, I look at and go, that. I love her story. You know, I love everything he's done. But I think, he's Telling Lies is incredible. He's very clever. I think also, honestly, Obra Dinn, I played like recently after I didn't play it when it came out. And I played it. Me and my girlfriend played it like in one sitting, the entire thing, and like, you know, damn, like those. I think those are the ones.
Awesome.
Like it's mostly indie stuff because AAA stuff I love. I love playing AAA games, but I play and I'm like, I couldn't have made this. So for that, like some of those, like I technically have the ability to make those games I said, but I'm not clever enough to do them that well. And that annoys me. That's the frustration. They're better than me. They're not just richer than me like the AAA guys. And that annoys me. So
yeah.
Wow. So Mike, we have come to the end. Thank you so much for your time. You were wonderful.
Thank you. You too.
Hey, thank you so much. This was really great. Now, before we stop the recording, where can people follow you and what are you plugging at the moment? Go.
I'm at Mike Bithell on the Twitters. In terms of what I'm plugging at the moment, Thomas Was Alone, always Thomas Was Alone. So I'll be plugging that till the day I die.
Thomas Was Alone on Switch.
Solitaire Conspiracy, which is doing nicely. We've got a game that we've helped out on called Fights in Tight Spaces, if people haven't heard of that. That's a really fun, very John Wicky kind of game. It's beautiful. It's a really cool game. Ancient Enemy is a game we helped out on, which is another Solitaire game, if you've not heard of that one. That's really neat. That just came out on the Epic Store today, I think. That's it. That's probably enough stuff. Buy all of those things, please.
Thank you so much, man. This was wonderful. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
You're very welcome. Absolute pleasure.